demonstration photography. Reach.
McBride.
I'm just going to run a cable through here as well. So you just need to be careful of your feet because this is going to be attached to a camera. You don't want to trip over it.
So it feels like less.
Exposed? The fuck?
Exactly.
Yeah, it's just running along behind you guys there.
There's not
What happens next? What happens next?
Look how lovely that soft light looks. It's beautiful, isn't it? And then if I... Oh fuck, looks like shite. Looks like half of the Facebook selfies. See every pore in your face. You ain't pretty. You filthy fucking whore flop. Bait you with my sandal. You ever bait a hooker with a sandal?
Slipper.
With a slipper?
One thing I have on like
Ah,
it's a lot of a glass bottle with them, but
with a glass
you
ball.
can't any physical evidence that
You're as much use as sand and an Arab's flip-flop.
that's delightfully racist.
It's not racist, it's genuine because Arabs, ironically, live in a desert place. So their sandals are sandy.
Yeah.
What is it saying on the back? Is it saying? What's the problem with that picture? So what can we do with aperture that will help us out? So think about our tap.
Bigger, open it up.
So
Spread
too
your-
much light. There's too much quantity of light. So
Close it.
yeah, close it down.
There's
Right?
an opposite of it.
So here's a panel here. There's our f-stop number there. That's our stop number there, right? So we go in here. We should be able to change this one. There you go. Let's try F8.
Oh, that's nice.
Okay, so F8. So we went from F2.8 to F4 to F5.6 to F8, right? So basically, the amount of light that's there is letting in 1, 2, 3 exponentially for 8 times less light, something like that. So each stop that you go down is halving the amount of light that goes in. So we went from F2.8 to F4, so that's half that, and then we went to 5.6, which is half it again, and then we went to F8, which is half it again. Right? So light travels that way as well, which is really, really, really handy. So, for example, if this is a window, right? Well, it is. It's an aperture into the room. So if my hand from this distance to here is 5.6, if I double the distance, it'll be F4. If I double the distance again, it'll be F2.8. Light travels in the same way. Do you know what I mean? It's the same in enlargers, same in cameras. That's why it's such a cool system. It's easy to go. I just don't have it. Okay. There's other problems with the picture. But we'll get into that in a while. The most obvious one is, it's probably still a little bit overexposed, is it? Maybe a touch? It's hard to know because it's projected. So you can see the difference. You see the difference between a projection and this? You never, ever see digital images. You never see them. You only ever see representations. So it depends on what screen you're looking at them at, and all that sort of stuff. And that's why in photography, color management is so important, is because every device that people look at them has its own bias. So you've got to try and figure out how to calibrate your machine so you're getting the least biased results when you're outputting it for other people. So it's great that you can see the difference between this and that, and then the camera will have its own color space. Every device has its own color language. Every phone has sRGB screens, for example, which is a color space, and it's the same on the internet, but most photography uses Adobe. Have you guys ever done anything on color management before? Have you looked at Lab and all those sorts of things? Okay. Well, just for yourselves, it's worth looking at Lab. Lab is like the universal color language that everything uses. Everything is from within Lab. So if you imagine Lab as a globe, every color that is used by any device is within it. Okay? And that's what's great about some of the new cameras, like the, I can't remember what they're called, Black Magics or something like that, is that what they're called? Okay. That was a good guess then, wasn't it? I wasn't just making it up. But they use sort of raw, a sort of combination of raw and something else, like in stills photography we use raw. Raw is lab, right? You're shooting in lab. And it basically means that you can make a decision about, because you have everything, you can make a decision about how it's going to be used and what device it's going to go on. Do you know what I mean? Because you're not cutting off any bit of it. And these new cameras with Black Magics do that as well. Alright? But it's good to know that stuff. Particularly if you're color grading and you're grading for specific devices. You need to know what they, like if you're using an Oculus Rift, which I don't know if anybody has. No, I didn't. Yeah, so well, you get to see it live. Dave is doing a wonderful project on the Oculus Rift. Isn't that right? It'll be, everybody can see it here on this floor in June 6th.
Whose birthday?
No pressure now, Dave. It's only my master's. But I got my degree. Then we got to show off. Anyway, so yeah, each device shows colors in different ways, but let's get back to the task at hand. So okay. Can anybody else notice the difference between this image and the one that we took previously? Let me just open it up.
Aye, sweat's coming out of me like a nun in a cucumber field.
He's open.
The sweat's coming out of me like a nun in a cucumber field.
Okay, so apart from the exposure, guys, can you notice the difference between these two images? Apart from the exposure, the colour's the same.
The further away, the one with more colour, that's right. Looks to be more focused, like those red blocks, for example, a bit more focused.
You can read them?
Yeah.
So it's not a case, it's sharpness is a kind of a strange term, right? Sharpness is, you can have a picture that is just of an eye, but everything else, like you're only focusing on the eye, but the eye is pin sharp. It's a sharp picture, do you know what I mean? It's just your depth of field is tiny, right? What the depth of field is the area of focus in front of and behind the object of interest that is acceptably sharp. Okay? Does everybody kind of get what I'm talking about? So we say this chair is what we're focusing on here, right, in our camera. What is in front of and what behind it, what is behind it is the depth of field, like how critically sharp or what level of acceptable focus it's in. That's the depth of field, right? So if this chair is sharp, it's a shallow depth of field. If all this is pretty much sharp, then it's a wide depth of field. Okay? So when we changed our exposure from f2.8 to f8, we changed the aperture down. So this is the other function of aperture, is that it affects the depth of field. So as you can see, these blocks here are a lot more readable than these. But look, we'll do an exposure that's the same exposure, but is has a shallower depth of field. Okay. So now we're going to go back to our 2.8. All right. We're going to go back to our 2.8. So, again, we're overexposed. Now, what do we do with shutter speed as opposed to f-stop? So we're going to keep the shallow depth of field because we like that. So, everybody? Sure. And so we think about the tap, we want less light. So with the tap, we need to turn off the tap quicker, right? Okay. So because we're letting a flood of it in, you have too much light. Okay. So the rate of flow. Nice. Okay, so we'll change this one then, and we'll make it faster. Okay, so 30, this goes in thirds, right? This, so that's actually a full stop there. 30 to 60 is a full stop. We went 4 stops the last time, right? So 125, 250, is that right? Is that 3? Or when we start at 30, 60, 125, okay, this is it. So this should be the same exposure. So let's look at the so that one and that one. Right. Oh, maybe it's a bit, maybe I got it wrong there. But you can see the depth of field difference? F8 at 2.8. F8 at 2.8. Yeah? You all seen that? Okay. Now, I might do something with glare then just to show that thing I was talking about with aperture. This is a Fresnel light, by the way. I'll talk to you about Fresnels in a while, but most movie lights on sets are Fresnels or Kino Flow type lights. So just watch your feet there again. There's more glare there. Jesus. I swear I've done this before. Is the child lodged in the tunnel of goats? Okay, we're going to just have a see if we can see it in these projections.
Fuck's sake, son.
Goodbye. Okay, so where are you, dirty skite? Okay, so I want you to see this area here.
Hey, sorry,
Hey, boss.
how long will you do?
We're going to take a break in 20 minutes, is that right?
Yeah. Okay, let's do that.
Congratulations. Can you do it too? Number one?
I feel like the Lion.
Nice one. Those are two distinguished fellows of the college as of yesterday. To be honest, I don't know why they did masters. They're fucking geniuses anyway, so it's just showing off, really, isn't it? Okay, so I want you to have a look at these areas here. And what we're going to try and do is see the effective aperture on the glare, okay, and the colour integrity. Okay? So, we're going to go up here, and we're going to change this 1 stop, 2 stops, 3 stops, 4 stops, 5 stops.
That's
okay.
insane.
Now, because I've changed that by 5 stops, what's going to be the problem with this? I haven't compensated anywhere else on the camera, right? So I've just changed the setting by 5x. So it's going to be 5 times darker than that. So I'm going to need to either change my ISO or my shutter speed in order to compensate for it. Do you want to see what it would look like if we didn't?
Yeah.
Exactly. No? Okay?
Looks like
So
ass.
we do need to make a change. So 5 stops, 125, 60, 125, 60, 30, 15, 8. Okay, something like that. 125, 60, 30, 15, 8. Okay.
Fucking beautiful.
It's probably not done much. It's done a bit though. Let's see. The last 2 pictures have been great. This one, this one, drag, preview. Okay, so can you see even that line, right? Just that line. Right? Just look at this line and look at it contract. Look at the light scatter contract. Can you see it? See the highlights on the front of it get more consolidated, there's more detail in it now, not just because of the focus, but because we've compressed the glare. The aperture is controlling the glare and increasing the integrity of the colour overall. Yeah? So that's the second function apart from depth of field. What do you think?
Looks lovely.
It's great, it's exciting, isn't it?
Minecraft.
Yeah. Okay, so I thought I'd show you that. Now, the last one of these in this exercise then is, let's go.
Sorry, bit of housekeeping.
Yes.
Who's going to shoot a paper? Oh, can we send it around so take attendance? Everybody sign up, please.
I've got one here.
You want to shoot it on that? Oh, are you?
There's loads here, you can get a lot of them back in actually.
You want to all around, right?
But you need there?
No, no.
Oh no, well, yeah, that's all right.
It's actually, it's all on the cover.
This one and this one.
It's fucking racking my arm.
I'm just going to...
Rafiki? No problem, bro. Can you write my name on it just because I'm recording and I can't be yours?
Okay, guys. So what I've done here is I've changed the sensitivity of the material, right? So we've changed the we started from, so the higher numbers in ISO means the more light sensitive it is. The lower the number, the less light sensitive it is. The only thing is with the lower, the more quality there is. So like, you know, if you were shooting a car or something like that, which you don't do anymore because cars tend to be generated as opposed to shot. But if you were shooting a car, you would want, for a 48 sheet or a billboard, you'd want as much quality, so you'd probably lower down the ISO. Now, we're underexposed here, so what do we do to the ISO? We got to increase the number, right? But actually increasing the number counterintuitively makes the glass more in our registers. Okay. So, how many stops do people think that looks out? Like, does it need to be twice as bright? Or we twice as bright? So twice as bright would be 320, 640. 3 times as bright would be roughly 1200 or something like that. Yeah? So we'll try 640.
420.
All right. So those are the 3 things. Does everybody sort of understand exposure now about the 3 things that you have to take into account? Now it will change depending on what it is that you want to shoot. Like, so if you decide you want to have a shallow depth of field, at least then you have one fixed thing and then you can operate your camera around that. Okay? If you need a wide depth of field, you can control your camera around that. Okay, so that's the basics of exposure. Is it anybody confused? It's okay to be confused. It's not, it may seem like it should be, you may think that it sounds simple, but you know, so sometimes it's tricky to get it. No, everybody happy?
What about the numbers in between? You know, where you're going between stops, and then there's all these ones that we're skipping.
Yeah, well I'm skipping because I know what a full stop is. This goes in thirds, so I'm doubling and halving. Because that's how it's almost because of my residual bias, because they only introduced thirds about 5 years ago when I'm 17 years, 18 years doing it, so I'm used to halves and doubles. And halves and doubling is how enlargers work. And it's also sort of like when you're looking at windows, when you're looking at available light, you don't tend to go, you know, that's 6.3. You kind of just think of doubling in halves, it's kind of easier. But it's the same thing. So like if you're on a third, you would just, like, because you know it's a third, if you want to increase by a full stop, you just go 3 steps. Yeah.
Is that the way it goes in, it translates that way in our software?
I don't know. Does it? It's in thirds?
Well, we can actually go in like micro steps. And there is a conversion that you will have to do. But I would advise that your brain work in halves and fulls. Mm-hmm. Because doubling the amount of light is a much easier thing to think about.
Yeah, yeah. Halving and doubling is much easier than doing it in thirds. You know?
And we can really do the fine tune. But we also have exposure control in that it really doesn't matter. You're really looking at the effect of the f-stop rather than the exposure. Mm-hmm. And you have so much control individually over each light.
I was asking Greg, you can actually create lights as well, can't you?
We can go to incredible levels of specific, but mostly you can create a rectangle of any size you want, make it a proportion of light, okay, and then control the amount of bulk. Can you choose
materials and stuff like that you're bouncing off and stuff like that?
You can.
Oh, cool.
Well, as you guys moved to Arnold, you can do that, but what we would have traditionally done was you create your big key light. Mm-hmm. And in photography, you use a bounce and you hold that to bounce your light back. We would just use a light. Okay. Okay. And fill that in with the light because we can have as many lights as we want. There's no budget restriction. And you can have sizes and you can press a button and instead of a big Dublin, it's California. And we can choose one light. What we would do is we would say, I'm using one light just to get the highlight where I want it needed. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But it doesn't light anything. Okay. So we can link things to lights. Cool. Yeah, you'd probably just need to be wary of the verisimilitude of it to a certain extent, like not slipping out of the physical world because otherwise it would look like art. Yeah. Yeah. So real world is really what you. Yeah.
probably why it's better for me to do a lens monkey.
I'll let you guys know. I just want to.
And we're going to take a wee break now because you've done exposure. Okay, so we'll take a break for 40 minutes till 12. Come back at 12 and we'll do rule of thirds, focal length. After that, I assume you guys actually probably know rule of thirds.
Yep.
Well, let's do it again. No. Okay, so we won't do rule of thirds. We'll just do focal length and what's the space compression. That sort of stuff. Yeah.
Sweet.
Right. Get out.
Get my son for DJing. Are you guys like still doing that?
Okay, guys.
We skip up a little. We can be for effort.
So, is everybody happy with exposure? Is everybody, you all had time to digest it, but so now's a good time to let me know if you don't get it. So everybody's happy? Yep. Okay. You're all excited.
Happy as a pig in shit.
Okay, so focal length, we talked about space compression.
It's been a while.
Looking for a pencil. I love my technology toy.
They're a bit amazing.
Top shop.
Oh, there's the clips. There's the vinyl.
I'm starting to feel really weird holding this and just recording.
Only 1.7 pages.
Learn this. I'm actually surprisingly quite comfortable.
Oh yeah, I'd be super easy bag. It's pretty bad.
Okay, so we're just going to briefly touch on something that before we broke for my to go and bang up in the bog. So that's why it took me so long. Femoral arteries start to close up, and I need a bit of time to find the right place to juice up. Right. Anyway, so we were talking a little bit about focal length before. So just as a compositional tool. What do we think about, I mean, do you guys give much thought to sort of like why you go wide and why you go long and all that sort of stuff, like why you do it?
I think if you want to get into good compositing, you're going to have to. Because I mean, whenever we were doing stuff, you tell me what cameras and lenses you were using, so it makes sense to have that information.
So like, for example, dramatically, say you wanted a shot where, say there's two people in conversation and in another part of the room, the person that they're talking about is in the room. And if you were to use a long lens, for example, you could focus on the people in the foreground having a conversation, and you could have the person that they're talking about soft in the background. And then for dramatic purposes, perhaps when there's a sudden realization about this new bit of information about the person in the background, you could pull focus to the person and then see their face and then see them interacting, but you're filling the frame that's intimate. Do you know what I mean? But you're reducing what it is that you're looking at. You're isolating say it was in a cathedral or something like that, and there was a conversation happening between these two people here and these people here. What you're doing is you're stripping out the space and focusing in on their relationship, and you're just doing it through focal length. Do you know what I mean? Does that make sense?
Does that
sort of puts it into dramatic?
Does that work sort of in a similar way, like that shot that was in Jaws? You know, that sort of like famous one?
That's a sort of like a drag zoom sort of
Yeah.
thing. Is that the one that you're talking
Yeah,
about?
where the foreground would move forward and the background would just sort of slowly ease out.
Well, that's the point of that is that device is that they use there is to give you a sense of unreality. So it's sort of like your world is turned upside down sort of thing. That's why they pull that focus. So it's like the laws of physics don't apply. They're attaching like an optical device that sort of fucks with you. Do you know what I mean? It sort of unsettles you. So that's what they do. The thing that I'm talking about is literally sort of like, it's literally stripping out the background so that the relationships are what you're focusing on as opposed to the... I can't actually think of a suitable anime. I don't know what you guys are...
Misfits.
Misfits did it, yeah. Okay. So, yeah, there you go. Misfits. Seen. So that's how you might use it, you know. Same with, like if you wanted to, if you were doing a shot of an establishing shot of a town or something like that, you might choose to use a crane shot with a wide angle so that you're seeing everything. But so they can do things. They all have different functions. So it's important to know dramatically or narratively why you would choose them. But it's also important for you to know the problems that you might have in using them. So, for example, with stills, the longer the lens, the more aggressively it shows off camera shake. So, for example, if you're shooting at a 60th of a second on a stills camera, not on a tripod, and you're shooting on a 400mm lens, you are going to have camera shake, guaranteed. So there's problems with choosing focal lengths for that. If you're shooting with a wide-angle lens and you're shooting a human, like say you're doing a fashion shot of a girl close up, and you're doing it rather than taking a step back, you decide to zoom out. But what you do is then you foreshorten them so you can make their shoulders look heavier, or you can give them a bigger arse than they have, or you know what I mean? They're like their belly comes out like that, and their legs are behind. Do you know what I mean? It's just not a good look. Sort of like that's kind of why most fashion shots for catalogs and stuff like that are shot on long lenses from low angles, because it makes legs look graceful, makes shoulders look good, and actually gives a disproportionately elegant view of the figure. Okay. So does that make sense? You also have problems with things like barrel distortion with wide-angle lenses, and curvature at the edges and stuff like that.
Is that what barrel distortion is?
Yeah, and then like you also have issues where if you're using things like, do you guys have shift lenses in virtual reality? Do you use shift lenses at all? Do you know how they work?
We haven't done that.
Okay.
Haven't a clue.
So maybe check out some YouTube tutorials on shift lenses, because they're really interesting as far as shooting wide angles in interior spaces. Yes, sir.
What is a shift lens?
Basically, the lens shifts. Like you can pull it up from the front. You can the elements split. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, so like narrow.
So yeah, it changes the plane. It allows you to move around in the circle of confusion.
Like westerns would be used a lot that kind of way.
It's more sort of used in. It's more used in architectural shooting and stuff like that. I think there was some of them used in. Actually, some of it was used in. The Coen brothers use it sometimes when people are like in drug-induced things, because they use it for how it warps the shift of field and stuff.
Like Big Lebowski?
Yeah. So it allows you to move around in the circle of confusion. Like basically, when you're looking at a picture, you're looking at a rectangle, but the picture that comes in is actually a circle. Do you know what I mean? It allows you to shift around in the plane a little bit and correct lines that are converging. So when you're doing a shot of a building from underneath, the parallel lines will start to converge. You use the shift lens, that will equalize it out and pull them back out. Okay? So that's why it's interesting for you guys to learn how to potentially use that. It might be a good device for you to use if you don't want everything. I know sometimes for dramatic purposes you may want that, you know what I mean? But sometimes you don't want it. and it can make architecture in particular look really, really powerful and strong. You know, like how you compress space changes the identity of the feel of objects. Anyway, case in point. So let's just have a quick look at. I know that. Oh no, I shouldn't be using that. I should be using this. Oh, it appeared. Okay, so can you see? So I went up 4 and I went up to there. So can you see how compressed that space is? Does that make sense to you? How compressed it is? Like it feels like the space between the objects is kind of
Crammed.
It's kind of compressed. You see what I'm talking about? So if I open it up a little bit, I can do this obviously more with a wide angle lens and really exaggerate it. But so can you see the space start to open up there?
Yeah.
Between the objects? So that's what I'm talking about. So again, if you want to try the hand exercise, right? If you want to try the hand exercise where you're looking at things and then you're doing that, then you're actually seeing how it will compress the space. But as you walk into it, you see the space open up, okay? Or as you do that, you see the space open up, okay? So either actually stepping in will open up the space for the angle, right? Go ahead, give it a shot. What can you do? Only embarrass yourself. Look at those fingers. Those horrible bony fingers.
McBride wants a hug.
Yeah. So can you see what I'm talking about? And as you move, like one of the things that people forget to do with stills cameras is to walk because they zoom. Okay. So like when I'm teaching my first years in Griffith, they're only allowed to use one lens. They're only allowed to use the standard lens, and they can't zoom. So they start to use the rule of thirds and discipline, and they move around objects. So they look at, okay, what's happening with the light? How do I place the objects and stuff? It slows you down, and working slower is better for discipline. Like once you learn those sorts of languages, then you can forget. Okay. The idea behind doing technical testing is in creativity, it's important for you to be in two states, right? It's important for you to play, and it's important for you to be closed, okay? So when you're closed, that's the best time for doing technical work that is, you know, it's learning, it's not innovation. And what you're doing is with the technical work is you're learning the language of your programs, of your cameras, of light, and all that sort of stuff. And you're learning it not necessarily in a playful way. Like you can play with it, but it's not necessarily innovation, you know. And then the idea is that you subsume that information so that when you're playing and when you're thinking in narrative and when you're actually in it, then you can be spontaneous and you can be playful and you can be creative when you're in this other space, okay, when you're in the innovative space. Does that make sense to you guys? So the more technique you can almost subsume and kind of forget, the better for you going forward as far as the visual medium. I'm just going to think of one other thing here. Like I was really, really good at English in school when I was in high school, like secondary school. That's kind of weird. I always thought I was still good at English. Do you know what I mean? And it turned out when I went back to writing, no, pants. And the same with drawing. I was great at drawing in school, but once I let the skills drop. So you can't forget, but you need to always be doing, you need to always be practicing for that level of subsuming. It still needs to be working almost in your subconscious all the time and informing your decisions. So that's why it's important for you to learn this fundamental stuff. It's not as important as the play stuff, but it fuels it. It fuels your innovation. So I would pay attention to it. Yeah, that's why it's good to know here. You only need to know what you need to know, but try and know it so it frees you. Make sure. Flower into. I'll just give you a quick look at how objects might get distorted, and then we'll start playing with that. Oh, that holds that on, doesn't it? Yeah. general, stick that on there. And then start off. Okay. Yeah, guess who has a sloppy work environment? And again, in the creative process, don't underestimate what this will do for you, like learning this stuff, what it will do for you time-wise. Like when you're on a shoot, or when you're directing, or when you're creating. The worst thing you can do is hamstring yourself by on-the-job learning. Do you know what I mean? Like, you need to know as much as you can know, so that when you're there, you're learning new information, not stuff that you should have known before you. Does that make sense? I'm just waffling really. Okay, so we're going to go in tighter or wider, so you can see the difference. And again, how the space is opened up with the wide angle. None of these shots are obviously critically composed or anything like that, so. Do you have a result there? Yeah. Wow, that's a bit bright. Bonk. Should be better. So again, you can see how the space is a lot more open. It just changes it completely. You know what I mean? So if you have a bunch of aliens running through there, it's going to look totally different. It's a different landscape to deal with. Different sorts of action can be captured in different ways. You know what I mean? Like different types of, like if you're shooting an action sequence, the lenses completely change how you capture the movement. So you dissect how each movement happens, what is the best way, focal length wise, and how you pan to capture that. The best, like I'm teaching fashion students at the moment to shoot video sequences for their own blogs, and they're like, what do we shoot, like our movements? And you kind of go, well, your sewing machine does this, you can do a stop motion thing if you actually putting your mannequin together. This is how you would shoot from these different angles, and it's learning the right lenses to capture the action in the most thrilling, compelling, or narrative ways. You know? Anyway, does that make sense to you? That like when you compress the space, it will change how you capture the action, and when it's wider, does that make sense?
Yep.
You've done all this stuff before, I assume, have you, or no, or no? Yes. Okay. But I think this is a good example because you can actually treat it as a landscape, and if you think about like how those compressed spaces as things come out from behind them or submerged or hidden by them, and then this is where it explodes into. Do you know what I mean? Like how the lens choice might inform you. Anyway, that's enough of that shite. Let's do some light. Right. Okay, so intensity. And with intensity, I'm not talking about proximity. I'm talking about hard and soft. All right. So this is obviously soft light compared to what we had earlier on, right? Okay. Now, again, hard and soft is the contrast of the quality of light that is coming from the light source, right? But contrast can actually change depending on where you are standing or where the camera is positioned in relation to the light as well. Does everybody understand what I'm talking about? Okay. So the longer the shadows, the more contrast it is. Like if you lower it, we'll show you how to model that in a minute. But that will also change the contrast levels of the light, where you are in position. For example, let me see. If you have somebody standing in a door and you're standing outside and you're taking their picture and they're just in the door, right? You'll have an overhead part of the door here that cuts out the top light, so all the light is coming from the front. And if your camera is there, then the light on them is almost completely soft because it's coming in the same direction as the camera, so you're not seeing any shadows. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So it's sort of a low level contrasting because you're not actually seeing any shadows. So, yeah. Does everybody get that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's sort of a good example of soft and So with a bare bulb, there's a bare bulb underneath this. There's two layers of diffusion going on here as well. There's a layer inside. So the light is modified. Okay, we put on a softbox that modifies it. There's a diffusion here and a diffusion here. Whereas a bare bulb will obviously be a lot harder. Other modifications that we can do are things like bouncing, which is also known as, we could fill. Okay? We could fill this existing light, which basically means reflect light back in. Or we could flag aspects of it as well, but we'll get into that in a second. But for the minute, that is a soft light. It is possible to go softer. For example, I'll show you how to do that right now. Okay, so that's obviously hard, direct light. And again, as you change your position, the light, there's more contrast created. Okay? Does everybody see what I mean?
Yeah.
As you come around from here, the shadows are, yeah, okay. Now, it's also filled in, so if I take this out, you'll see change. Yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Now, I'm going to do something else. So this is called bouncing. You see how soft that is compared to direct? Bouncing is the softest type of light that there is. Yeah. So those are light intensities. And obviously they're going to have different aesthetic things depending on what it is that you want to get out of it. Okay?
Yeah. Sorry, what's the difference between when it's slight and reflected? Like, it's just depending on what you use to pass it?
Do you mean fill, like, okay, well I'm bouncing this light,
Yeah.
okay, I'm bouncing this light off a surface and back in. So the key light is bounced,
That's
right?
not reflected, is it? That's different.
Well, it is, but you're bouncing it off that and back on. So we'll say it's a key, we'll say it's a light, right? It's just one. Say we're just using one light. So as we bounce it off, it's a bounced light source, right? But this is then reflecting or filling back in. You could use the same terms. Do you know what I mean? It just depends on how you use this sentence. You know what I mean? But that would be considered more of a fill. Or you could use a second light source that does that, but it's not as powerful as your key light, which is the higher level of light. Okay? So the output is stronger from the key. Right? Unless, of course, you're using backlighting or something and you're using that as a device where there's a sort of a wash of light around. I'm going to just put a quick question to you now. Given what we... what's the best way of explaining this? Will I do it with a bottle? Will I do it with a... I'll do it with backlighting. I won't put that question to you now. Right, we're going to just look at a little bit at modelling. Not in the sense. Although you can obviously tell from those moves that it would be really good to actually do more of that, right?
Mm-hmm.
But sadly, you're disappointed. Now, these are a really nice way of learning how to light.
Skipping.
They're also a good way of, I'm just going to show you a few demonstrations with these. Yeah, it's a good thing I've got somebody to sort this bag out, isn't it?
What are they?
They're just work lights that you buy in the likes of Lidl, I think they're like €3. So like, whatever it is. In sterling, probably 4 pence or something. But I've used them for music videos. use them for. So there's a few things we're going to do with these particular things as a demonstration. Sorry about all these bleeding that's and that. Started doing now we will. Hopefully this is one of the ones that works.
What are these lights called? That's not already.
That's a Fresnel. Oh, you remind me to actually show you a Fresnel, like properly. Yeah.
Is that legal?
Actually, yeah, these are fucking great little hooks for demonstrating bits and bobs. I use these a lot for makeup shoots as well. Now, is anybody wearing particularly dazzling eye makeup today? Any volunteers? Would you mind volunteering? Would that be alright? And I'll show you why I use them for eye makeup. Now, I'm going to put this really, really close to your eye. So we just, now, can everybody see that? Come on, anybody who wants to see it close.
Oh.
They're going to stare at me now.
Oh no.
So can you see what the proximity of it does? So like how the proximity of it changes the intensity when you go, are you okay with that? Is that alright? Can you see how beautiful it is on the eyes? You will see. Yeah? Can you see it on the eye there? Yeah. Okay. So, thank you very much. Round of applause. Well done. Yeah. Okay, so let's take our wee skull.
Give it a name.
So can you see why these things are fun to play with?
Swag.
Can you see how that's changing? Okay. You just want to split into little groups and just look around with these. So you five.
Stick it up your butt. Crack.
Samuel like an airport, just first thing in the
No, you're okay. Do you mind if I record you just playing about with that?
It depends on what the nature of your shot is. It depends on the size of your light source. This is pretty weak. Like this is a really low voltage bulb.
I just want to see how it works. That way I don't have to come over like after.
Yeah, or you can get a stronger
Look at the
light.
strobe that's giving me.
You know, like you can get a light that's
It's like
100 times stronger than this.
it's like purely strobing out like.
No, you just need to do it.
Sorry guys.
It's hard to completely diffuse the shadow, but you
What
can
if we
get it.
go all the way up?
That's really soft.
Push it out here. Shadow a little bit.
You can get like really. Oh, but right, you stay over there and I'll go like right here.
Hey, he's trying to get a certain light.
Oh, we're just messing.
What would it be like if you used two? I'm going to show you a bit more in a while, but the shape of the light is important.
It's really good.
Does everybody see why the shape of the light is important? Look at how it's delineated in form. So it's just a spot from a distance. Do you know what I mean? And can you see why these things are cool? Aren't they cool for like actually seeing how light, like you can easily go top of it.
That looks neat.
So like you can teach yourself lighting with simple lighting like this, like with a skull or with whatever, and how you then modify it after.
That looks awesome, doesn't it?
You know, it's probably quicker than using
That looks fucking
more
crazy.
intuitive than using programming. Anybody else want to have a go at the skull there? Even look at that, like using the lights as a part of the image as well. It's really nice too, you know? So, obviously in different environments you'll have different types of rhodium. You'll have sodiums, you'll have halogens, tungstens. For example, if you're going to have a look over behind you, we have candle, incandescent, and tungsten. So tungsten, depending on the actual wattage of it, will give you a certain type of colour. So a 50 watt bulb will be more orange than a 250 watt bulb. All right. You can see shade. Shade is generally what is considered neutral. That's sort of where the international community says daylight is, right? Oh yeah, how's it going? So this is the colour spectrum, right? So fluorescence, household fluorescence is just sort of in the 43, 70. So that tends to be a sort of greenish light, okay? So, for example, I had to shoot like a 2-acre sugar factory. It was one room, and it was lit by fluorescent lights, halogens, and then I was going to supplement it with my own flash heads. So I brought in about 5 flash heads. So what is the problem with me taking a picture in that environment?
Too much light.
No, it's more so.
Like a cold lit.
So my flashes then are 8,000. Their fluorescence are, let's say, the 4,370, and then there's halogens. So there's 3 different colours in the environment. Do you know what I mean? So one part of my picture is going to be purple, another part of my picture is going to be yellow, another part of my picture is going to be neutral. So I had a mix of colours. Do you know what I mean? Like if you're in an underground car park and you're doing a shoot down there, it's more likely going to be green because it's going to be industrial fluorescence or sodiums. So, but what I had was a blend, and I had to. So what was my way out of that? My way out of that was to crawl around the scene for 4 hours, putting purple gel on all the fluorescent lights. And this is before Photoshop, so I tested it with Polaroid, and I could see that there was a purple cast on everything. Oh, sorry, a green cast on everything, so I put purple lights, purple gels on all the lights. And then, when I got the film back, I realised that it was a problem with the Polaroid. So they were actually daylight balanced fluorescent lights, and I needn't have gelled them at all. And I'm terrified of heights, and it was like 4 stories up, and it was raining hot sugar on me as well, so it was really deeply unpleasant. Anyway, but now you can just look at the back of your digital camera or your laptop and go, okay, so that's the culprit. You know. And in fact, you could probably blend it. You could probably isolate the areas and go, okay, this. But it's nice to blend light sometimes as well. Okay. So, for example, what colour is the shade on a sunny day?
It would be darker.
What colour is it?
The shade?
Depends.
Will be bounced.
Depends on the surface.
Well, you would, but say it's a neutral surface. So what colour is added to whatever surface is in the shade?
In the shade or in the light?
In the shade. On a sunny day.
Blue?
Like brown.
Blue.
Oh yeah.
Deep blue is in the shade. Okay? So, you know, it's worth knowing things like that. You know, like if you're creating a scene and you want it to look real, you're going to have to, you know. Sometimes it's really nice to split tones as well, like so that your highlights are warm and your shadows are bluer. You know. So, for example, we've been shooting with these guys, but let's mix the color here. So can you see the 2 colours?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's the way you can see better. So if you were to turn that off, if you were to lock that off, right? Then your shadows return to neutral. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
But otherwise your shadows are because this light source is higher. This is creating the shadow, okay? And then the shadow is filled with the colour that's left over from the next most powerful light source, right? Which is yellow. Okay? So sometimes in fashion shoots and stuff like that, like I'll have a red light or I'll have a pink light, and then the shadow's filled with pink. Do you know what I mean? Yeah? It's worth knowing that sort of stuff. It's also worth knowing that the environment influences your shooting. So if you're shooting in a room that's red, if you don't neutralize, like say you have a big light source on this side coming in, and you have reds on this side, it's worth knowing that if you don't neutralize that red, if you don't neutralize that red, it'll fill your shadow with that colour. Do you know what I mean? So what are the ways of neutralizing it? The ways of neutralizing it are to put in a grey, or to put in a white, or to put in a black.
And is it just the kind of like the sort of secondary light that will always fill the colour?
Yeah.
Or the shadow? Or so the most intense light will never fill the shadow, it'll be always kind of like the secondary light there?
Whatever, yeah, because the shadow is obviously unless you're filling it in. Like, we are filling it in there, because this is actually adding light into the shadow. Okay? It's taking with it, but it's also adding it in. Yeah? So, okay. Best way to explain that is to turn that off.
And that's adding into that because it's bouncing off the white of that.
Yeah, so like that's not really hitting anything and coming back. Actually, so say we went with reds. Can you see the reds there now filling in the shadow on that side?
Yeah.
If we have nothing now, there's no fill. So whatever light we're getting from anywhere else in the room is what is filling that shadow. And it's from this source. And it's from that. And it's from that. Okay? So that's what's filling that shadow at the moment. If you put that in, you're filling the shadow a lot. I don't know if you can, probably this will too. Is that, you're filling the shadow a lot, but you're filling it back with this because this is now the strongest source of filling. It's bouncing off this and going back in. So it's still the same colour. But your environment completely colours what you're doing. So like if you've got wooden floors and stuff like that, that's going to uplight. Well, it's just, so if you're creating, I asked Greg, and apparently your environments do, your virtual environments do bounce back when you're using the better rendering software. So it's good to be just aware of that. It may be pleasing. It's what's pleasing to you. Do you know what I mean? And you can take lighting too far. Like if you overlight something, it can look a bit, it's got to be pleasing. Yeah. Anyway, so
what you would consider good lighting would be lighting that's pleasant to the eyes, opposed to lighting that is just straight up.
Well, when I mean pleasing, it could be that it's unsettling.
Yeah.
It could be horrible, but it's whatever does the job that you're intending. For example, there's a picture of this industrialist called Krupp, and he was shot by a guy called Ernst Haas, and he was hired to photograph these great industrialists. Ernst Haas was a Jew and knew that this guy was involved with the Nazis, and that he was a scumbag, so he did him like this. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And he got so that was pleasing for him, like the fact that he was lit like that. Your man fucking threw a shit fit when he saw the pictures, but that was how he was lit. So it's whatever, when I say pleasing, I don't necessarily mean
whatever
aesthetic. Yeah, whatever it is. Same as the exposure, it's what your intention is. Whatever is pleasing for the intention that you're, whatever communicates.
When you say like fill it with like grey or neutral, how do you do that? Like what does that mean? Like do you put like a grey or something?
Well, in practical terms, for example, say I was shooting a huge gown, right? It's sort of like a mad, whatever, an Alexander McQueen or something like that, and we were shooting in this castle, but there was a very bright red floor or something like that, and the red was bouncing up and colouring everything like that. I could put a grey down or a neutral that would just eliminate that red off camera. Do you know what I mean? Out of shot, and it would take a bit of the damage out of it. So probably in your own environment, then you could just colour that section while you're doing it, or throw in an object or something that does the same thing. I don't know how you would do it. truth be known. But I use physical objects to adapt the light. What's happening? Does that mean? Yeah. Okay. So that's colour temperature and blending colours for. So I don't know. Do I have any examples of mixing colour? Sorry, 1 second. Let's see if I have. No, just weirdness by the looks of it. Oh, there's a. Can you see that they've used a colour for the fill?
Yeah.
They've used a purple. So that's either a light source or it's a card or something that's brought in. And that colour contrast is sort of giving it a nice lift. So you can see it in practical terms what we're talking about, mixing the colour temperature of the sources of light. Yeah? Anything else of interest in there? Hard light. Bomb light. Hard light.
How many different people would have to work on say that one issue, the fashion itself? Would you work with a couple of different people to get that one kind of balance, to like get the fashion across and the light?
Yeah. Big,
yeah.
It depends on the. Sometimes they crew of 40 on some shoots, depending on how big it is. I just thought I'd show you this. The reason why I wanted to show you this is because of the f-stop, right? So, let's see if I can open this up in previous. Now, does anybody want to take a guess at what f-stop that might be? Like, you don't have to know a number, but do you think the lens is wide open or is it closed down?
Wide.
Wide,
looking up.
Now, why would you say it's closed?
There's more intense light going on to her, so she's like being lit by obviously I don't know, like spotlights or something.
You see-
Something really intense light.
Okay, so basically, if we were looking at this, we can do it in a while. We can probably do an exercise that shows us, but this is a very good demonstration of it. Can you see this information is still held here, and these colours are still held here, right? Remember we were talking about our stream earlier on, about how it delineates form and stuff like that. With those severe light sources coming across on a wide open, more than likely the information would start to completely degrade, right? It would sort of just bleed out. Also, we've got great integrity on the colours and all that sort of stuff. And then if you look from nose to ear, it's all acceptably sharp. So, and because it's shot, I can tell it's shot on a long lens because it doesn't look like, you remember the spaces we were talking about? It looks like it was right tied in like that because the space is compressed. So if it's a long lens, the problem with long lenses is that their depth of field is a lot shallower than wide. Right? Wide angles give you huge depth of fields. The longer the lens, the shallower the depth of field. Okay? So that's why long lenses knock a lot of things out of focus. So this has to be a big aperture because everything is kind of sharp, but also because of how the tones and the colours are controlled. It's one of the best examples that you can see of understanding long lenses and big f-stops. So it's controlling the tone, it's controlling the shadows, it's controlling the depth of field. Does everybody understand that? Does anybody want to do more on depth of field, like as far as wide angles and, or do you get what I'm talking about? Do people understand? I mean, we did it earlier on when you saw the difference between 2.8 when we were shooting our first shot and how, as we stopped down to the smaller holes, that the bricks got more and more in focus in the back. So that was a good thing. But like I say, it also happens with wide angle lenses versus long lenses. You will get a lot more acceptably sharp with wide angles. Okay. If anybody has any questions or wants me to do a demonstration on that, don't go away without me showing you. Alright? You want to see more on depth of field. There's other things that influence depth of field, like format, but you don't need to know that because you're probably not going to be flipping around format too much, or do you? Like, would you be using IMAX camera sort of thing as opposed to 35 mils? Like, do you change in that way? Okay.
No.
So that would affect your depth of field if you were to do that. The format changes as well. So for example, if I was shooting on my Canon with a degree that shows, with a lens that shows 40 degrees of view, it would be completely different to a 10 by 8 inch plate camera, you know, the ones with the hood. The plate camera from the same distance, like literally, say you were photographing me sitting in this chair here, right? And you're shooting me on a standard lens from here. My whole body, everything, even wide open, I would practically be all sharp. On a 10 by 8 on the same lens, my nose would be sharp. And that's it. Do you know what I mean? So the format effect, but I said I wasn't going to explain it to you and I just did, so I probably polluted your head with more stuff than you need to know. But it's just if you're looking at movies that use 70mm and you want to know why they have so much colour and why they look a certain way, it's because of the format. Right? They have more colour, they have more tone, and their prime lenses operate differently. It's just more epic and there's more of a presence to the pictures. Yeah? Anyway. But it's horses for courses. I mean, I'm not saying one's better than the other. Again, it depends on what it is that you want. For my masters, I just used my iPhone, you know. So, and well, I went one extreme to the other. I used one camera that was, they were like 7 gigs. 3D frame, the 3D scanning thing. I used that, and then I used my phone. So I used the two. So it was like one extreme to the other. Anyway. What was I shouting on about there before? Okay. Sorry about my language, by the way. There's not much I can do about it. It's sort of innate to me now. Okay, so spot and flood. I'll show you this Fresnel lens now. Okay. So this is a Fresnel. This is the most commonly used movie light. Can you see the lens? You all see that? Yeah. You see there's a lens in there? Yeah. What that does is it focuses the light. Okay. The bulb inside it also moves forwards and backwards. Okay, inside the tube. Now, the purpose of the Fresnel is it's the same on front and at the back. It's concentric circles, and they go round and round, but they also go in and back. So when the light hits it, it goes focused. Okay, comes in and gets focused. So it narrows the still. Right? It narrows the still. Now they can. Where am I plugged into this? I'm not plugged into at all. Goodbye. So when we talk about spill, we talk about the amount of light that comes out of a particular light source. Okay, the angle. Okay, same as what we were talking about earlier on. So a spotlight really gives you a narrow, and a softbox or a bounce will give you a really wide. Okay, so it is set on. It's still a spotlight, so you can still see how focused it is by the. Do you know what I mean? By the circle. So it's still a very hard direct light. Judging by shadows, we talked about light intensity earlier on, but you can. As you move it, you can narrow the point as well. You see that? So that's flood, spot. And then these things are called barn doors. So what they are is very, very, very localized flagging, right? So flagging is creating your shadow and narrowing the focus of the light. So I'm flagging the light, I'm flagging, and I'm flagging. But this is an on light flagging system. You can remotely flag as well. So, for example, we can flag by simply bringing this into the scene as well. See what I mean? So you're creating a shadow. Now, the intensity of the shadow from a remote flag changes as you bring it forward and back from the light source. Okay? Does everybody know what I'm talking about? So in simple terms, watch the shadow there. You see it getting harder? You see it getting harder and softer? Yeah. So you can change, you can graduate the sort of the the integrity of the line, the ratio as it cuts across. And I use that an awful lot. I take away, when I'm shooting fashion, I take away light more than I add. I really do. I bring loads of 8-foot versions of these, and I just take away light all day long, you know. And I do add it as well, you know. These would be the main things that I use for lighting. I use these on location. I use them for taking away light. I use them for adding it in. I use them for channeling light. So I build walls and I build huge soft boxes. So like I build like 20-foot versions of these out of these, and I put lights inside them. Yeah. But you guys, like most photographers, well, that's fucking crazy. But you guys can make 700-foot ones if you like. You're not. Yeah. The only thing about those that's interesting to me is polystyrene gives you a very specific type of reflective quality. Like, do you remember we were talking about pearls and different things? Everything has a different reflective quality, and the reason why I like using those is the nature of the reflection comes off. Yeah, very pleasing. Now,
This is soft. Reflection.
yeah. They're great for working on location if it's cold and sit your bum on because they're insulation. Okay, so we showed you a little bit of bouncing. We'll just do a little bit on that now. Okay. Right, ouchie. Again, you really shouldn't move these. And you shouldn't hold them because I've just burnt my fingers and I could have blown my face. I didn't. Anyway, right. Yeah, so bouncing, you can use things like umbrellas. A lot of, say, fashion shooting, for example, you would use like 8-foot umbrellas really close in. You'll have scrims, won't you, you'll have a variety of scrims available to you. Actually, one of the most interesting scrims that I don't have access to show you today is I buy sheets of mosquito netting. I just couldn't find it anywhere. The reason why I use mosquito netting is it's like using a graduated filter across a room in real life. Do you know what I mean? Does that make sense to you?
Mm-hmm.
So, like, say this is a mosquito net. As you turn it like this part will be more open than the far part from this side, anyway, right? So there'll be less light coming through this bit and more light coming through this bit, okay? And if I reverse it, so say you want to light more, you want to even out the light more on this side of the room. So if you do it like that, then the light is coming through here, so it's going to spread more to the far side than it is to the, do you know what I mean? It'll even it out a bit more. Does that make sense to you guys?
Yeah.
Right, okay, so diffusion. And again, it's probably a good idea for you guys to play around with this in real time. If you like, you can do it now, but you have to split into groups a wee bit. Sorry, I have no concept why these cables are so short. Have a clue. Okay, so can you all see? Right. Okay, so we're going to intervene in the light. Yeah? See that? Now also, you see how that changes it?
Mm-hmm.
How you can wrap it around and model the objects. Do you know what I mean? Like if you're doing something like the iPod, the iPad, or sorry, the iMac mouse, or you're doing even that projector, like again, the shape of the light and how you tilt it changes the forms and the intensity. Can you see that on the skull, how that changes? No? Anybody see? It's not they're not massive changes, but they are, it's happening. Like it's kind of critical lighting. You don't see huge shifts, but the shifts are kind of important. It really does model quite a lot. You can actually see, like in that Crook portrait what I was talking about how modeling, you can really pick out the shape of the skull and change, Or the old classic, what is this guy thinking? Do you know what I mean? Like when it's sort of, I don't know, my eyes in shadow there, or can you see it? Yeah. Anyway. Yeah. The unseen. Oh no, what's happening? Anyway. Okay, so fill we did a bit, coverage we didn't do. Right, so coverage is the size of the spot. Okay, so we did flood and spot with this Fresnel. We'll have a look at this other light thing. Okay, so actually maybe would you hit the lights? The biggies? Perfect. Okay, so we have a selection of lights here. Of dishes. Oh, so this is a honeycomb. Okay. Honeycombs do a variety of things. If they're tight, they basically do the same thing sort of the same thing as a Fresnel. They focus the light. So this is actually a spotlight attachment to the front of this dish. Okay, so, but it's a wide-ish dish going into a honeycomb. Okay? This is a more regulation this is called a cone or a snoot. Again, you only get that amount of coverage out of it. Okay? So you can see that depending on what you choose, it affects the degree of spill that you have, or at the angle. So you can actually, you can potentially line them up and go, okay, this, and this, and you can have a look at them. Also, they're not quite honeycombs, but there are grids that sort of stop light from spilling off. So you can actually even attach them to soft boxes. They're not as tight as those at all. And really what they're doing is channeling the light. So you're having a strip. You're having this, it's not spilling out, it's more focused. Okay? They're just sort of like cloth attachments that sit on the front. This is called a beauty dish, which is used for shooting makeup, basically. So, in general, it's placed on a boom arm. So the boom arm comes up here, overhead, so that you don't have a stand underneath. So you're shooting your makeup or your beauty shot straight. So why is it directly overhead? Remember we talked about the window or the door earlier on? Because the light is coming from that direction, it's shadowless, pretty much, right? Because it's directly up the lens. That's why, like, on your night out in the town and stuff like that, just with your own phones, close-up pictures of people tend to look really good because the light source is right beside the lens. It gets rid of a lot of imperfections and shadows and sort of, you know what I mean? Whatever the fuck that means. What does that mean? I'm going there, Dave. It's happening. It's all a fucking simulation. None of this is real! It's all bollocks! Yeah. Hopefully, okay. So, does everybody understand that? I'm back to talking about the shape of it. We probably again do, but this is a ring flash. So this is again, do you remember that eye shot we had earlier on?
Yeah.
Ring flash. So the camera goes in there, and that's where the ring comes from, the actual shape of it. The further you go away from the source, the more it becomes a dot, the closer it is, the bigger it is and what it's reflecting. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Do you guys use reflections much when you're lighting? They're really interesting to use. Like they can really, really make a scene shimmer and stuff like that. They're great if you're shooting a heroin addict. Because I had to shoot a guy for his job, and it's like I need a headshot. And so I put him under a tree, and I put a bouncer under it, and the dappling from the tree came down, hit the thing, and lit his eyes and made him look less. Do you know what I mean? He looked like there was actual life in his eyes, you know? Anyway, so yeah, you gotta shoot a smack addict. That's the way to go. So I've got you covered. Yeah.
How does that kind of lighting work with film, like with movie camera, or would it be the same thing?
Yeah, it needs to sit on the camera, right on camera. I'm sure you can select it, and you can change the size of it, I would imagine. Like I used to use one for, and actually, in fact, you could probably make them out of fluorescence. Like I've shot makeup like that. Do you know what I mean? Like you've made grids of these. Yeah. So you could potentially make them yourself. You could go, okay, so I'm just putting these continually over the camera. Or make a huge fucking ring with little spots instead of, you could make it into spots. Do you know what I mean? So you could actually see like separate bulbs. Well, that'd be really interesting. You know, that's the thing about reflections and lighting using reflections and things, is that you can really live the scene. Like, so, like if somebody was to come to you and say, how do you want to light a car? Let's say, if you imagine, can I borrow that mouse there? Is there a mouse?
This one?
Yeah. So they say to you, how do you want to light a car or whatever. Like, there's a few different things that you can do, but like look at when you use a long strip on that, look at how it delineates the form. You see what I mean? No? Like it's really quite clean and it really shows the design and the curvature, right? Oh, sorry, just finished, sorry. You see what I mean? And again, the intensity of these. Maybe knock off the overheads there so you can see. Probably would have helped if I'd cleaned this as well, right? Do you know what I mean? I don't know what you're seeing from your angle there.
Got like a harsh shadow on the bottom, but the rest of the product is like that.
Yeah. So, well, obviously you can add and take away, and you know, or you could use two. Do you know what I mean? Like a lot of cars are a bit like that. That's why Top Gear always shoots in tunnels, because there's a long stretch of fluorescence on the ground, long stretch on the below. That's why they shoot there. So it makes the cars cool, because you're seeing the design of the car. But also, at the same time, you could put it under a tree in winter. Do you know what I mean? White sky, and then when you're looking down, the black silhouette. So you're really using the silhouette as part of the graphic sort of way you're lighting the scene. Same with puddles and stuff like that. Yeah. Okay? So intensifying. Yeah. Right. So, what time is it? You don't need a break already, do you? It's all sort of zapped. It's my engaging personality, isn't it? It's which? 1:15 last time. I just said 4. I have no idea why this studio is designed this way, by the way. The idea is that these things are up off the floor so people aren't around, but it means you can't move, you can't critically light. But you can't bring these. You can bring this one in, but you can't bring that one. Yeah. Maybe I'll use this one then. Is there a cable there? Yeah. Does anybody want to sing a song about a horse while I like this? Or no?
My one's inappropriate. If I'm Carrie, please.
I'm not stuck in my head. Hi, boy, sir.
This is so neat.
Right, so. You just messed this place up,
Por favor.
But that's also mine.
It's bone sucking good. You can't do that. This is going on my blog. During my what?
During these things, actually doing that.
I'm pretty sure you have, because you know you're one of those. One of those ones, you know what I'm thinking? It rhymes with plague. So.
Okay. So again, we're going to intervene, but we're only going to intervene in the shadow. Anybody have an idea how we're going to do that? Only using one light.
Oh, the
Use a mirror.
like going off the light or something. Like with the
So there's one light, yeah. Well, yeah. That's.
Sound like you need a spliff, Mom.
Good. Enema. Coffee enema. Mixed with some grapes or poppers.
Yeah, I've got that.
No. Oh, there she is. Hell yeah. Now,
I didn't expect it to
so
be this.
I want to shoot at f14, right? What's the problem with me shooting at f14 without using the flash? What do you think is going to happen? What do I need? That's quite a closed down.
Bounce light.
How much light do you think this is giving off? Right?
No.
It's not giving off a lot, right? So, if I'm shooting with a really, really small iris, what do I need to do? Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so those are my two options. I don't have to take both. Sometimes you do have to take both. Particularly if you want to capture motion, you probably have to put it, but we don't have to capture motion here.
Is ISO normally the last thing we change? Or
Well, it can be the first thing we change.
Yeah.
It can be the first. It depends on what you want. It's completely.
would people change it if they want more noise? Like, would you ever want not to
Yeah, I
noise?
don't think people generally want more noise. You know, in general, people want, unless you want something that looks like surveillance or generally that has poor quality or something like that. But I'm assuming you can add that afterwards as well. Anyway, is this on? Is this thing on? Button. No, that's not the button. That's the button. Okay.
Dabba.
Jesus, get the coffee.
Okay, so
No idea what I'm missing.
we're set at 640 at 14. It doesn't give me a reading actually of what my meter wants to do. So we'll take a picture, and you can see how dark it is. Right?
Too many clicks.
It's pretty dark. It's kind of nice though, isn't it?
It's like it's a fireplace. You put on
It looks like a bum.
Oh yeah.
So we're a little bit open there. Now, what do we think of the colour?
Oh, it's lovely. Tongue saying.
Do you like that yellow? Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
colour.
It fears me.
So that's tungsten, right? So you can actually change your colour. See this in here? This is your colour. It's on auto white balance at the moment, which is what all your parameters whatever are normally set to. But you can change it, right? So that's set for a sunny day, right? That's set for the shade. Remember we said so blue, so it's going to make that warmer if we choose that option, right? That's cloudy day, so we're telling the camera it's a cloudy day, so it's going to set the camera for that. Now we're telling it we're shooting incandescent, we're shooting with a bulb, right? So we'll keep that and we'll just do another test. Watch the colour change.
More blue.
Yeah.
Blue. Greeny, whatever.
Yeah. Okay. So now we'll open up a little bit, so we'll brighten it up a bit. Okay, Daisy, what happened there? Okay. Now, potentially also you can set your camera to something called custom white balance, which is where you would shoot something white and you would tell the camera this was white in these lighting circumstances, and then it'll neutralize everything towards what you've told it was neutral. Does anybody want me to demonstrate that? You want to see that? Yeah?
Go
Okay,
on.
so we'll choose something that's neutral. So I'm going to just shoot this white. Right. And then on the camera, I'm going to go to. Is that still showing on the screen what I'm doing? Okay, something let me do it. Unless I can do it remotely.
Oh, me.
Okay, it's not letting me do it. So we're on our scale then, because it's incandescent, right? So on our scale here, where do you think you should shoot? I can input the number that I want to shoot at, right? So it's
18.
saying tungsten 3200, incandescent is 2800. So does 2800 sound good, or do you want to go more?
18!
So, okay, so we'll go in here. We'll try that. I think it's probably going to be more down the other end. No? Okay, does that look, that looks kind of neutral, right? Okay. We just recompose and refocus.
Looks like a Nat Geo article. No, I just said it looks like a National Geographic photograph.
Okay, so is that being better for you guys as far as exposure and all that sort of stuff goes? Should be a bit crisper. Okay, how do we feel about the exposure? Do you want to go a bit brighter? No. No?
Whap it up the full. Oh, just fucking blindness me.
Now, this is the actual point of this exercise. This blackboard here, whatever is it? Is it a blackboard?
Yep.
Right.
Is that from the street or something?
It is.
Many.
Could you do me a favour? Could you take the picture?
Yeah, sure.
See, the mouse is just should be over it, so just click it.
What do you want? Where?
Whatever you like. Did that not change anything? 1 second.
I'm not sacred.
Sit down.
Try again now.
You got a bit of the card, eh?
Yeah, that's fine. So what I want you to look at is this area here. Okay? Okay, that area in there. We just here and
What are you? Get away. Get out of my lecture.
okay, so it's the same exposure. Can you see what's happening in the area? So what we've done is we've intensified the shadow. Alright? So that's what black does when you introduce a black. You're not necessarily, it's not even necessarily taking away light, it's just intensifying the shadow. So that can be a really, really cool thing to do, depending on what you're lighting. You can just add that little bit of